What if the most important conversation in modern Christian history happened not in a cathedral or shrine, but in a teenager's bedroom, whispered between dying breaths and the glow of computer screens? What if the future of faith itself hung on a promise made to a 15-year-old boy who spent his final days coding miracles instead of mourning his fate? Sometimes the most profound truths hide in plain sight, waiting for humanity to evolve enough to recognize them. What if the promise made to a dying teenager wasn't just about miracles, but about fundamentally transforming how 7 billion souls could experience the divine? What if Carlo Acutis didn't just die? What if he graduated to become Christianity's first digital saint, forever present wherever faith meets technology? The promise referenced throughout Carlo's hidden files became the subject of intense speculation among church officials who were quietly briefed on the discovery. The promise's fulfillment became undeniable when healing reports began pouring in from around the world, all connected to digital encounters with Carlo's continuing presence online. The promise that Mary had made to Carlo ultimately revealed itself as a covenant between heaven and the digital age itself. Through his death and technological resurrection, Carlo became the patron saint of internet users, computer programmers, and digital evangelists worldwide. His feast day, October 12th, was celebrated not only in churches but through coordinated online events that connected millions of participants globally. The traditional boundaries between physical and virtual religious experience dissolved as believers discovered that divine love could flow just as powerfully through fiber-optic cables as through medieval cathedral stones. The leukemia had ravaged his young body with merciless efficiency, yet his fingers still moved across his laptop keyboard with an urgency that baffled his parents. Antonia and Andrea Acutis watched their son work through his final hours, creating what he called his last gift to Jesus. They assumed it was another addition to his revolutionary website cataloging Eucharistic miracles worldwide. They had no idea he was encoding something far more significant, something that would remain hidden in digital vaults until curious investigators discovered it years later, encrypted with algorithms that shouldn't have existed in 2006. The night of October 11th marked the beginning of what Vatican investigators would later classify as Phase 1 manifestations. Sister Maria Teresa, the hospital chaplain, entered Carlo's room for evening prayers and discovered something that would haunt her for years. The teenager was sitting upright despite his weakness, his laptop screen displaying what appeared to be an interactive map of every major Eucharistic miracle site in Christian history. But the map was moving, pulsing with golden light that seemed to emanate from the screen itself. More unsettling still, Carlo was speaking to someone the nun couldn't see, his voice barely audible but filled with an reverence she'd witnessed only during papal audiences. "The promise will change everything," Carlo whispered to his invisible companion, his eyes focused on a corner of the room where shadows seemed to dance despite the harsh hospital lighting. Sister Maria Teresa felt an overwhelming presence, a feminine warmth that filled the sterile space with an indescribable sense of love and sorrow. She reported later that she distinctly heard a second voice, melodious and gentle, though no words were clear enough to transcribe. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Carlo occasionally nodding and typing rapid sequences of code that appeared to be far beyond his technical knowledge, even for a boy renowned as a computer prodigy. What Sister Maria Teresa witnessed that night would become the foundation of one of the most controversial investigations in modern church history. The encrypted files discovered on Carlo's computer after his death contained architectural blueprints for cathedrals that hadn't been built, GPS coordinates for future miracle sites, and most mysteriously, a countdown timer set for specific dates over the following decades. Hidden within layers of sophisticated encryption were video files that showed Carlos speaking directly to the camera, explaining events that hadn't yet occurred with prophetic precision. The Vatican's Congregation for the Causes of Saints would spend years trying to understand how a dying teenager had predicted specific miracles with startling accuracy. The mystery deepened when investigators realized the encryption methods used to protect these files were based on mathematical principles that wouldn't be discovered by leading cryptographers until 2012. Dr. Elena Marchetti, Italy's foremost expert in digital forensics, was called in to analyze Carlo's hard drive 6 months after his death. What she found challenged everything she understood about technology and time. The files were not only encrypted with future algorithms, they contained digital signatures that referenced computing protocols that didn't exist during Carlo's lifetime. Either the boy was a coding genius beyond any known prodigy, or something supernatural had guided his final digital creations. The investigation team's first breakthrough came through analysis of the hospital's security footage from Carlo's final days. Enhancement of the recordings revealed inexplicable light anomalies that appeared to take feminine form during the exact moments when witnesses reported hearing two voices in conversation. Frame-by-frame analysis showed that these light patterns occurred consistently whenever Carlo was observed typing his encrypted messages. Even more remarkable, the electromagnetic signatures detected by hospital equipment during these episodes matched frequencies associated with documented Marian apparitions at Lourdes and Fatima, according to data collected by previous scientific investigations of miraculous phenomena. As word of the investigation leaked through Vatican corridors, opposing factions emerged within the church hierarchy. Progressive cardinals saw Carlo's digital prophecies as evidence that God was adapting his communication methods for the modern world, using technology as a vehicle for revelation. Traditional factions worried that accepting such claims would open dangerous precedents, potentially validating every supposed digital miracle or electronic apparition reported by attention-seeking individuals worldwide. The debate reached papal attention when preliminary investigation reports suggested that Carlo's hidden files contained accurate predictions about future Vatican policy changes, including reforms that wouldn't be announced until years after his death. The promise that Carlo repeatedly referenced in his encrypted communications remained tantalizingly unclear to investigators. Fragments of decoded text suggested a commitment from Mary to use Carlo's work as a catalyst for worldwide spiritual renewal, with specific emphasis on reaching souls through digital media. Other passages hinted at miraculous events that would authenticate his message to skeptical modern audiences who demanded scientific proof of divine intervention. Most intriguingly, the files contained detailed instructions for creating what Carlo called digital sanctuaries, interactive websites that would spontaneously appear on computers worldwide, displaying real-time footage of Eucharistic miracles as they occurred. The teenage saint's bedroom became a secondary investigation site when his parents reported ongoing supernatural phenomena months after his death. Electronics throughout the Acutis family home began malfunctioning in specific patterns, displaying religious imagery and playing Gregorian chants through speakers that weren't connected to any audio source. Carlo's computer would spontaneously activate at 3 a.m. each morning, always opening to his Eucharistic Miracles website, which had somehow updated itself with new content despite the fact that Carlo was no longer alive to maintain it. Neighbors reported seeing strange lights emanating from Carlo's former bedroom window, and several claimed to have witnessed the silhouette of a young person typing at a computer that was supposedly unplugged. The Vatican investigation team faced an unprecedented challenge as evidence mounted that something genuinely supernatural had occurred during Carlo's final days. Traditional methods of evaluating miraculous claims seemed inadequate when dealing with digital prophecies and technological phenomena that transcended current scientific understanding. Cardinal Secretary of State Tarcisio Bertone privately expressed concerns that the Church was confronting a form of divine communication that required entirely new theological frameworks to comprehend and evaluate. By the first anniversary of Carlo's death, the investigation had documented over 40 specific predictions found in his encrypted files that had already come to pass with remarkable precision. These ranged from minor church administrative changes to major world events that affected Catholic communities globally. The accuracy rate was statistically impossible through chance alone, forcing even the most skeptical investigators to acknowledge that Carlo had somehow possessed knowledge of future events. The question was whether this foreknowledge came from divine revelation, as the promise seemed to suggest, or from some other unexplained source. As investigators prepared their preliminary report for Vatican review, they realized they were documenting not just the death of a remarkable teenager, but potentially the birth of an entirely new form of sainthood adapted for the digital age. The promise that Mary had allegedly made to Carlo was beginning to manifest in ways that challenged traditional understanding of miracles, intercession, and divine communication. Whatever the truth behind those whispered conversations in room 237, the consequences were already reshaping how the Catholic Church viewed technology's role in spreading faith to a world increasingly dependent on digital connection rather than physical presence. As the 5th anniversary of Carlo's death approached, the full magnitude of the promise's fulfillment became clear. What had begun as whispered conversations in a Milan hospital room had evolved into a global spiritual revolution that redefined how humanity could experience the divine. Carlo Acutis hadn't simply died young and been declared blessed. He had become Christianity's first truly digital saint, forever present wherever faith intersected with technology. His legacy challenged believers to recognize that God's love was infinite enough to embrace every form of human communication, from ancient scriptures to modern smartphones, transforming the entire internet into a vast digital cathedral where seekers could encounter the sacred through the devoted intercession of a teenage boy who understood that heaven's love knows no technological limitations.